Hello and welcome to this Argus podcast, where we'll be talking about some of the debate around the intervention in market pricing in the gas and power markets. I'm Matt Drinkwater. I'm the manager for gas and power analysis here at Argus, and I'm joined by my colleagues Natasha Fielding, who edits the European Natural Gas Report, and Justin Colley, who edits the European Electricity Report. So we're in an environment where we've seen incredibly high prices, which have stoked inflation across Europe and created a huge amount of pressure on politicians to intervene in various ways to try and shield their citizens, their voters, their electorate from the worst of these high prices. Scale of the issue and the scale of the price rises that we've seen is unprecedented. And so in such an urgent situation, they've been reaching for increasingly radical ideas, and as well as subsidies directly for end users. There's also been a lot of discussion about capping the price of gas and power in the wholesale market, which has been gathering pace since the Commission issued some proposals on this topic at the beginning of October, although the ideas go back even further than then. So this is where we are. This policy debate is churning along in Brussels and elsewhere. But what's changed since these ideas were first put forward? Natasha, what's your perspective on this?
Well, so since the European Commission circulated its latest proposals in early October, European gas prices have fallen quite dramatically. They're now well below their record-breaking highs over the past summer, though contracts delivering in the winter are still historically high and still too high for a lot of industry. The reason for the fall in gas prices is largely a very mild start to the winter, which has really delayed the onset of heating demand and allowed companies to fill up their underground gas storage capacity. Underground gas storage sites are now really brimming, and we're already well into the second week of November, and there hasn't been a proper start to the winter yet. But having said that, it would be foolish to assume now that the situation has stabilized, and this dramatic fall in gas prices is symptomatic of the very high market volatility. We could definitely still see price spikes this winter, particularly if Europe gets into a bidding war with Northeast Asia for LNG cargoes, which could happen if it gets cold across the Northern Hemisphere.
So it's still a very febrile situation, it seems, in the gas markets. And Justin, on power, is it similar?
Hi, thanks, Matt. Yeah, the power market is very much at mercy of what's happening in the gas market, especially now where pretty much all the prices are being set by gas-fired generation across Europe almost all the time. So if gas prices fall, then power prices fall. So we've seen very much the same trend, and for the same reasons. It's been an unusually mild start to the winter, which we've been lucky with so far. So countries like France, where they're traditionally very reliant on electric heating, they've not had to step up the supply as much as they may need to further in winter. So yeah, power prices have fallen pretty much, in fact, halved over the last couple of weeks, looking at the short-term forward market. But yeah, there's absolutely no illusion that this is going to be a medium or long-term trend. All the forward prices are still higher than they've ever been if you look back at relative years. So yeah, I mean, even at the end of October, we saw quite a strange phenomenon where gas-fired generation had become more competitive than coal, which, looking at forward sparks and dark spreads, so the economics of running gas or coal-fired plants, coal is way in the money ahead of gas, going quite far out. But as Natasha said, there's loads of gas in storage at the moment. It's been mild, so power prices have in the short term fallen quite a lot.
Okay, so there's a lot of volatility. There's a lot of price risk still in the market. and prices are still high in historical terms, and they could go higher still if or when even the cold weather eventually arrives. So that really raises the question in terms of when winter really bites. This political pressure to do something about prices could well come back in earnest. So what are some of the proposals that are being floated around about intervening in the power market?
As you said, the sort of more formal proposals came out around October. The intervention looks like it's being pressured to come in on the wholesale side of the element of the market. So I think everybody accepts that there needs to be something done in the market because industrial production processes, large companies are shutting down production because they can't afford the costs of power and gas. So something needs to be done. But a lot of the proposals that are floating around are very fragmented and they're causing quite a damaging environment in the market, and especially the way it's perceived by investors and by traders. So just to sort of loosely outline what's happening, the EU is looking at some level of a cap in the wholesale market, which would be put on inframarginal power generators, so not the ones that are setting the price, and you would effectively share the difference between that cap and the market price among the downstream side of the market. Now, the added complication of this is that there is the potential of this being fragmented across Europe because different European countries have the freedom to implement this at a way that they see fit. So the proposed EU-wide cap is 100 and 180 euros per megawatt hour, but there is potential for member states to implement this at a lower level. And also, which is even more concerning, is the fact that this can be implemented on a retroactive basis. So Belgium and Germany, for example, are considering putting in place retroactive price caps, which for a fully liberalized market such as electricity sets a really dangerous tone for investors going forward. And, this is one of the things that we're looking at is how do we get ourselves out of this situation, which is to encourage investment in new technologies, in particular renewables. If you start tinkering with the wholesale market, in particular on a retroactive basis, people don't want to invest in the market because they don't know that the conditions that they're investing in now are going to persist going forward. So yeah, just to sort of summarize, there are a lot of proposals going around. As these new non-papers come out, they tend to sort of twist and turn with what's being proposed up until now. But in short, it could get messy in the way that it's going to be implemented when that comes into force potentially at the end of Q1 next year.
All right, thanks, Justin. And this, these non-papers, these EU discussion papers that are circulating, obviously, because as you mentioned, a lot of what's happening with the power prices is being driven by the gas prices. Natasha, how are they looking at intervening in the gas market potentially?
The most controversial idea that the EU is considering on the gas side is a generalized cap on wholesale gas prices. Quite apart from the dangers of distorting price signals in that way, which we could come on to later, the challenge of implementing a price cap like that effectively is huge. So the latest idea from the EU is involves only a cap on forward trades on exchanges, not on the over-the-counter market. If that were to be implemented, we could assume that liquidity would then move into the over-the-counter market instead, and that itself would come with greater risks. In fact, a lot of liquidity shifted to exchanges from the OTC markets after gas prices began to surge because of the elevated counterparty risk. So that price cap, apart from being potentially very a dangerous precedent to set for the wholesale gas markets, it's very difficult to see it actually being implemented fully.
So effectively, it could just shift the risk off the exchanges and into all of these bilateral agreements between the firms that are active in the market, and presumably also push the risk onto the banks that are funding their credit lines. So it doesn't solve the problem of high prices; it just moves the risk around. Justin, was something you wanted to chime in on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the shift from exchanges into the OTC market, which is a potential fallout from this mechanism, is one in power that is particularly difficult to implement, because the way the markets have developed now is that you have the market coupling algorithm where you have the cost of electricity and the cost of cross-border capacity traded on an exchange, an organized trading platform, and that allows you effectively to allocate power across a region for the best welfare benefits, right? You're always using the cheapest power possible to supply that marginal megawatt hour of electricity. If you take away, if you're capping trade so significantly on the exchange but not in the OTC market, then market coupling doesn't work. And so these benefits of, social welfare benefits of distributing power in the most even way across a region, it ceases to exist anymore, which sort of goes against what the EU's been pushing for the past 8 or 10 years.
Right. And going back to what you were saying, Natasha, I mean, this kind of interlinkage between the markets, that's a key part of how the wholesale market functions, to signal where demand is greater, where gas is needed, where power is needed. What kind of impact would a wholesale price cap have on regional gas trade in Europe?
Well, there are many potentially concerning implications of a price cap. One of them is that if you cap gas prices throughout Europe, then you are removing those price differentials between European gas markets. So, for example, prices in Germany's gas hub have been significantly higher than surrounding countries, and particularly Spain. The reason for this is that Spain has ample access to LNG, and Germany as yet doesn't have direct access to LNG. It also had a significant amount of storage to refill in the summer. Those price differences meant that Germany sucked in as much gas, pipeline gas from neighboring countries as it possibly could. If you suddenly destroy those price differences, then there's no longer an incentive to send the gas where it is needed.
And of course, the same thing's also been happening in the global LNG market in terms of very high prices in Europe, been attracting a lot of LNG into Europe, which has been helping with refilling storage through the summer. I was wondering, Natasha, if you could help me. What's this idea of an LNG benchmark, new LNG benchmark the Commission's been talking about? What's that idea about?
Something that is a bit puzzling to the market at wide, actually, is that the EU has this idea of basically manufacturing a new benchmark, which it hopes would be a representative price of LNG delivered into Europe. I can certainly see what they're trying to do and why they're trying to do it. The aim is to bring down very high gas prices, but the challenges of generating a new benchmark and building up trust in market participants in that benchmark, the difficulty of implementing that can't really be emphasized too much. And also the EU wants this to be a complementary benchmark, so they're not trying to force market participants to move to a different price reference. And it's very hard to see why market participants would, in fact, decide to turn to this new price.
Okay, so it's the Wayne's World school of benchmarks. If they build it, they will come. I suppose that's the logic. But okay, to wrap up here. So, at the time that we're having this conversation, the winter, as we mentioned, hasn't really begun in earnest in Europe. But, the legislative process in Brussels is is relatively slow. By the time that any of these proposals actually came to fruition, it would likely be the spring of next year. So how do you think the landscape could look then? And what do you think the implications would be for this policy discussion and longer term for the market? I mean, Justin, if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah. I mean, what you said is exactly true, right? We've not got into the toughest time yet. It's been super mild. Prices have fallen. We're not in winter. So, and certainly it doesn't look like any of these proposed measures are going to be implemented by the end of the year. There are so many other things going on at the moment. Obviously, COP now is taking the forefront of discussion. So it kind of depends what happens in the winter. So many countries in Europe are putting in place potential quite severe measures, which would be very disruptive to how the market has traditionally operated, because everybody's worried about security of supply, right? Everybody has been scrambling around for the past couple of months to see what they can keep online or bring back online to make sure that we have enough power, enough energy in the continent, especially trying to move away from gas. So depending on how bad things get, we had a pretty bad drought in summer. So if the hydro supply really dries up in winter, if we have problems with the French nukes, then hopefully this won't happen. But if countries start cutting exports, then you really destroy a European market sentiment. And so if that happens in winter, then who knows how we approach markets on a European basis coming out of that. But, you know, as you said, the gas storages are pretty full. We've got more nuclear plants coming online, all the coal, all the lignite, doing whatever we can really to ensure that there will be enough security of supply. So, yeah, maybe by springtime, the market will have resolved itself, and these increasingly complex measures that are looking to be put in place will be pushed back even further. But, you know, I could be completely wrong.
And Natasha, in the gas markets, what are your thoughts?
In the gas markets as well, there are some quite extreme possibilities for the end of the winter. If the whole winter stays pretty mild, if supply from LNG and pipeline suppliers, you know, excluding Russia, if that stays plentiful, then gas storage sites could actually be pretty full even at the end of the winter. If you look at forward prices in Europe at the moment, there actually isn't much of an incentive for companies to withdraw from storage. There's actually an incentive to keep that gas in the ground for next winter, when it could be potentially a tighter situation. So at one end of the scale, we could have not much gas actually being withdrawn from storage this winter. On the other end of the scale, if it gets very cold this winter, and if there are unplanned supply disruptions, which can happen, of course, from time to time, then potentially companies will have to basically empty their storage facilities, and then the job of filling storage next summer will be extremely challenging indeed. In fact, more so than it was this summer, as we can potentially expect very little Russian gas coming into Europe throughout next summer. And these questions, these kind of potential extremes, you know, as Justin outlined, could have big implications, not just for, you know, the next year or two, but also for many years to come, because it could really impact EU lawmakers' decisions on these regulatory interventions.
Of course, we have this very difficult and very hard to navigate fundamental situation. And of course, for any traders who are involved, all of this debate about what might happen with price interventions is just an additional uncertainty, an additional headache for them to try and grapple with on top of all of these unknowables on the fundamental side. So a lot of moving parts to try and keep track of, it seems. I think we're drawing to the end now of our podcast. Thank you all very, very much for listening. I was joined by my colleague Natasha Fielding, European Natural Gas Editor, Justin Colley, the European Electricity Editor, and I'm Matt Drinkwater. Thank you very, very much.